Hey everyone, welcome to the Cornerstone Family Talk podcast, a conversation designed to help people grow deep and live tall. There's no better place for people to grow than in a family. So welcome to the family. You'll find out very quickly that this is a compilation podcast. One episode you may hear an interview. The next may be a story or a testimony, or we may be diving deep into theology or church leadership. So welcome to Family Talk. Let's get started. All right, well, welcome to Family Talk. And here at Cornerstone Church, we have this podcast, and we like to bring on some of our church members. And so I'm here today with Clark and Lauren Snipes, who have a very interesting story, a very unique journey. They were married for 11 years, and then they got divorced. They were divorced for 6 years. And then they got remarried and now have been remarried for 4 years. So we're going to hash through their story today. And I think you're going to find it encouraging and beneficial. So let's jump into this. So you guys have known each other for a long, long time. And then you guys really started dating when you were at school. So tell me this, how you guys got together as far as dating, maybe what the first date was like, or how things were at the beginning.
You go.
Well, we had always been such good friends and almost kind of like brother and sister. So it was really funny to get asked out on a date, and had to really think long and hard about it. But we went out. We went to Chili's in Athens, good old Chili's for college kids. Clark teased me about the cost of the bill, and I was mortified, but I didn't realize his humor. That clued me in, and he still to this day says, "Wow, I ought to get in the hamburger business."
Oh, man. Yes. When I asked her out, I was serious. I was like, this is the one.
Yeah, so you felt like from the beginning, like, this is one for me.
Yeah.
Okay, nice.
But we shared the same values. Mm-hmm. And, we're both Christians. She's good looking.
Thanks.
And, we basically wanted the same things out of life.
Yeah.
So that's kind of how it went.
Yeah, so how long did you guys date before you got married?
Year and a half.
Yeah, that was a good year and a half.
And then we got engaged after that, right?
Well, I mean, that was total. It was maybe a little over a year and a half that we got married.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then, so what was marriage like for you guys from day one? What was that like?
Day one was good. Day 4 was when it all hit the fan, Kevin.
Yeah, what happened?
What did happen?
It was honeymoon. It was a honeymoon. It was.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, something didn't go quite the way he was thinking it would go, and the rage monster came out on the honeymoon.
Yeah. Wow.
And I was floored and taken aback, and had never ever seen anybody behave that way, and it started a pattern from there on out.
Yeah, so from there, did things get worse, not better, or what happened?
I think I don't remember. That's so fuzzy. That's such a fuzzy part, but I remember it was kind of touch and go.
Yeah, I think it was
didn't
just
take much to set me off.
It was denial. Like I didn't realize this was long term. I kept thinking each time, there would be a rage or an explosion. I thought it was the issue at hand. Like what have I done now, or what is this problem? And didn't realize this is a much deeper long term thing. So it took quite a while to navigate those choppy waters of, oh, this is how it's going to be. This is not just because we just have moved in together and are just figuring out married life. It began a pattern.
Okay.
Yeah.
And did that last basically the 11 years, the first 11 years of the marriage?
It did. It got the first, I would say the first
Probably
several years. It was, I don't remember Lauren really doing anything that bad, you know what I mean? It was, and I look back on it now, and it was just my insecurities. You know, I didn't think my needs would be met. I mean, and you can take that. That's all kind of needs. You know, emotional, physical, whatever. And then it got to a point where we just weren't on the same page about anything. And instead of handling that like an adult, I didn't. I mean, I just exploded. And then I would always wonder when I said I was sorry, why don't you love me like you did before I exploded? And that's stupid. But I mean, that was the mindset I had. You know, you're supposed to forgive me and move on. But you can't. It's not the 50s. You know what I mean? And so it just. And we separated.
When I was pregnant with Davis.
Yeah, we separated.
So that was 6 years in, I guess.
And I think the shame of that, even though it was kind of self-inflicted, I guess, that made me even madder. But I tried to keep it under wraps, you know. But and when she came back, when we got back together after that, she started bowing up a little bit at that point. You know what I mean? She got a little not anything like I was, but I guess she kind of was at the beginning stages of having enough, you know. And I think she started goading a little bit at, you know, and rightfully so. I'm not picking on her for that, but it was just and it just got worse. And the more I did that, the further apart we got. And then if she did something, it just, like I was telling you earlier before we got started, that ball of yarn just got bigger and bigger and more tangled and more tangled. And it never got dealt with.
Yeah.
We tried. We did several counseling sessions with people, but I don't think it never was the right person. And like we were saying earlier, we kind of went the Christian counselor route, and I think that's great. But when it gets to that point where it's so damaged and so toxic, you need some professional help, in my opinion. So that's kind of where it's at.
And you were still you still had some of that, I don't know if you call it young buck or whatever in there. We would get maybe 3 sessions in, and we would get past the love and the respect verses, and they would start maybe stepping on toes, and they would probably start with the man first. We would never get to me because they would step on his toes in session 3. Well, what are you doing? What's your behavior? And he would get really mad and not want to go back. And so we would kind of hit a stop. Didn't want to go back. And so that was another thing that kept us from getting really good help. And I think there were people, I'm sure, that wanted to help and come alongside, but we just couldn't push past that mark. And I should have gone by myself, and that's something that I didn't really realize and didn't pursue, and I wish I had.
Yeah, we never got to the point of where, because I had some twisted mindsets about some things, and she had some twisted mindsets about some things, but we never got to the point to where we could deal with that because, I mean, a lot of times it never got past me.
Yeah. You know, it's interesting. You know, we know you guys had been Christians for a long time.
Right.
Right? Were Christians when you got married.
Yeah.
Going into a marriage, did you expect to have these kind of problems based upon how you...
Absolutely not. No. No. And I think growing up in Christian homes, my parents were very active. His parents were very active in church. We were always in church and knew the Lord. And as teens and in college, I think the two of us that's one thing that drew us to each other. We were kind of set apart. I mean, we didn't live the party lifestyle in high school and college, and we did really love the Lord. So I think there was probably an arrogance or a pride of some kind, like we are going to have the ultimate Christian marriage.
Yeah.
We're going to serve the Lord in a mighty way, and
Did the true love waits thing? I mean,
Yeah, we were-
you're a cut above if you do that.
yes,
That's what we
yeah.
thought. You know what I
Yeah.
mean?
Yeah.
And but life and living with someone else, it's not easy.
Yeah.
Especially being two firstborns, like we talked about earlier.
Right.
But I don't know. It was tough.
So you had 11 years of marriage. You had 4 kids during that time period. Life is busy, packed with stuff. At one point, you had a prophetic word about your marriage. Would you just share a little bit about that?
You share it.
Yeah, we went to get a prophetic word, which was kind of a new thing for us. And I think it was the first year we were married. We didn't have children yet. And we went to Destin, Florida. There's a church there that did that. And so they didn't know us at all. And we had prayed on the way there, like, oh, what do you think it's going to be like? If it's fake, we're calling it out. We're calling this out. So this particular person prayed first, and then part of the word was that the Lord says that one of you is a racehorse and one of you is a plow horse. And it's going to be very hard, but trust me, and I'm going to bring you to where you walk step in step. And we were a little confounded. We were like, well, I mean, maybe God's telling them we have difficulties for sure. We didn't really, looking back 20 years later, you really see man, that was quite a word. That was quite a word, and we didn't fully get it at that age.
No.
So tell me a little bit about, you've been married for like 11 years, right? You get to this point where you feel like nothing is working, there's no hope. Tell me about that mindset. What were you going through that eventually led you to get divorced?
Let's see. I remember when it happened. I got to a point where I was like, man, I want off the train. I just need a break. This is killing me, and I know Lauren felt the same way.
Mm-hmm.
He's killing me. This marriage is killing me. And but I want to back up and say one thing first too is on top of all of that, we had 4 kids in 5 years. Isn't that right?
4.5 years.
4.5 years.
Yes.
That's
4.
a lot. That's a lot.
That's a lot. And I don't even know what she was dealing with at that point.
Yeah.
Because you never, by the time your hormones get back like they should, you got another baby on the way.
Mm-hmm. So
I think that was part of it too. But it had gotten so bad that I felt I was carried so much shame because I wasn't raised like this. This is not how marriage is supposed to go. I do love this woman, although I probably don't show it like I should. But I don't know what else to do. I just don't know. I just want it to be over.
And for me, I'm sorry, I think I was getting enlightened. I was starting to read books because we had been separated twice. I had these 4 little babies. I was very fragile emotionally just from, I think, just being really beaten down emotionally. And I was also very hard. I was very hard-hearted. After, you separate and promise things are going to be different and you work on it, and then it happens again. And it's very humiliating to go through a separation and then, everybody knows you have problems.
Oh, yeah.
Not once, but twice. Meanwhile, you're cranking out little babies, and everybody's like, these people are the craziest people. I was just real hormonally, I'm sure, but my heart was so hard. He just probably at that point couldn't have done anything. I didn't trust him as far as I could look at him. I was like, I can't believe anything that comes out of his mouth. I'm just angry, and resentful. And I felt completely abandoned by God. My relationship with God was just probably at its lowest point ever, because I thought, I've wanted to serve you. I wanted to be the good Christian wife, have the wonderful marriage, do ministry, raise children who love God. And this is what you handed me on a platter, when I thought I didn't have any red flags going down the aisle. You talk to a lot of people that do, and they go, "Oh, I knew." But I didn't. We thought, this is amazing. Yeah. And I was like, and this is what you've handed me. So I was just in shambles emotionally. But I did start reading, and I had gone to a counselor a few times, and maybe he handed me some materials. But just what God really says about divorce, because there's such a huge stigma in my mind about it. And about what does verbal abuse look like? What does emotional abuse look like? What does spiritual abuse look like? Oh, wow. Maybe there's more to this toxic cycle than just, somebody has a temper and somebody makes the other person mad. And so I was getting enlightened, not fully, and I had a ton of healing to do, but I think that's what planted the idea in my mind of going like, I don't have to live this way the rest of my life. I do not have to live this way, and it's not what I want by any means, but living like this is not an option. I'll probably start drinking or doing something and be dead if we continue to live this way. And I don't say that in jest. Like, people have to find a way to deal when you live in that. And it's a miracle God protected me that I didn't. So that was my mindset that was leading toward the end.
I remember right at the end, I know I was changing for the better. But
right before you got divorced?
Well, I don't know the time period, but I could tell that. I don't want to say that she was like gone, but she was so hardened.
She wasn't at the same place.
No, and it was not that I was thinking, well, I've changed, this will make it, but I could just tell she was. I'd never seen her like that, Yeah. But, when we're human, you can only take so much, And it's one thing if you lose your temper a little bit, but I'll say it for everybody here. I was verbally abusive. I never put my hands on her and never did anything like that. But you can hit somebody so hard with your mouth that it wouldn't matter if you touched them.
Yeah.
A bruise will heal, but what you say with your mouth, that doesn't heal quite as easy. And I had done that for a lot of years. So just me changing for 6 months or 8 months, how long it was, I had beat her in my mouth so much that she was hard, and I don't blame her for that. But so I think that was the point where I kind of really lost hope. I think she had already kind of given up, And, that's a terrible place to be. Yeah. There's no reason for a marriage to get to that point. There's no reason for it. But you got to be willing to say, man, we are screwing up bad, and get some help. You got to be willing to do that.
And I want to add one thing, not to pour salt on your wound that you're saying, but just for other people, because I know that this happens. This is not the only instance, but there's spiritual abuse too. When somebody, I think it's very common in the South. I think it's common in the church when somebody goes, and not that Clark said, I'm the man around here, but there's an air and there's a mindset, and using the Bible against someone, this is my right, and this kind of thing. And I just want to highlight that, not to embarrass him, but I just want to throw the shadows off of that and put that in light. That is not the picture of submitting to one another in godly love and caring for one another, and it causes a lot of damage.
Yeah, that's good. I'm glad you brought that up, because we see this in the church very often, where we use the Bible to beat other
Yes.
people up.
Yes.
And so husbands can do that, the wives.
Yes.
Wives can find some verses to do the husbands.
Yes.
And so we've got to be careful. And leadership can do that to members in the church, or,
Right.
so we've got to be careful and not use that as a club. And
Yeah.
I like that. I like to focus that submitting to one another and not just
Yes.
the wife submit to the husband, right? There is a
That's
submitting
right.
to one another. And that's very important.
And I think that's which I learned later when I was divorced, that's the overarching theme in
Yeah.
Ephesians, or maybe it's chapter
Ephesians.
5. But,
Chapter 5.
that one verse gets picked out a lot by marriage counselors
Right.
and pastors, and
Yep.
wives submit. But nobody talks about, wait a second, before you can have all that, you got to have that mutual submission and,
That's right.
and respect and laying down. And I think
Yep.
it's so important.
Yeah, that is good. That's good. Okay, so things have gotten really bad. You guys are right there. You get divorced. What happens?
It was nasty. I mean, we could have just gone somewhere, signed some papers, and been done with it. But that's not what happened. We went to court 3 times. 3 times. And I mean, we had a judge. It was nasty. And that was probably one of the things that was the biggest hurdle to get over before we got remarried. Was the going to court.
Really?
Because and I said this not in a bad way, but I mean, when you get to that point, which I don't recommend it. I mean, I'll say it right now. I do not recommend that. But when you get to that point, it's like a boxing match, in my opinion.
Yeah.
You got to duke it out for. You can either duke it out or not. And I was of the mindset of I talked to some guys that are Christian men that I love and I look up to, and one told me I've been through this before, and my biggest regret is I did not fight for my kids. And I don't believe that Lauren would have just taken the kids and never let me see them. But at that point, there were so many hurt feelings and anger. I wasn't just gonna take anybody's word for it.
Yeah. There's almost a paranoia going on. You're afraid the other's going to make a move that's going to cut you out some
Right.
way. So you've got to get in there before that happens. And so
Right.
you're fighting for every scrap.
And she's not a fighter per se, So it might not have gone that way, but
It wouldn't have.
yeah, it might not have gone that way. But I just wasn't willing to take that risk.
Yeah.
And when you get lawyers involved, I mean, it was what an education.
Oh yeah.
After that ordeal was over, I remember saying, "Well, now I know why everybody cracks jokes on lawyers. I never understood that before." When you get lawyers involved, it becomes a much bigger thing. It's almost out of your hands, not entirely, but it grows into something you never could have imagined. And they push you to do things. They can manipulate you. They withhold information, maybe just that suits them. They all play golf together and with the judge, and it is just it's a very insidious, it's a very ugly thing. And I was very, very naive to how it worked. And so going back to him saying it was probably the biggest hurdle, it certainly was for me, just because the damage, the betrayal, the damage that it inflicted was like nothing I had ever. It was more pain and more betrayal than the whole 11 years for me. It was absolute trauma.
Wow.
Yeah.
And looking back on that, again, it should never get to that point, but it did. And I think where we were as individuals, and Lauren may disagree with me, but I think it got to the point where somebody was going to have to tell us, all right, this is what you're going to do. This is how it's going to be, because obviously y'all can't get along, and this is what you're gonna do. This is set in stone, and this is how it's gonna be. And I probably needed that, and that's what we got.
So what was that like being divorced? You moved to Athens.
Yes.
You stayed here in town. What was it like? Tell me some of your feelings, how you guys managed this with the kids. Tell me a little bit about that.
Well, so our schedule was that we would exchange kids every other weekend. He would get the children, and then, we would trade off holidays, and then he would get more time during the summer to make up for some of that school year time. So, I mean, you're not free of the person that you wanted to run from and never see their face again. You're seeing them
You're
every
tired,
other
or just still
weekend
tired.
on Friday afternoon. And so Athens and Americus are 3 hours apart. So we met in Forsyth. That was an hour and a half for each of us, basically. Or Macon. It eventually changed to Macon. When things were real icy and cold, it was just a quick, in the Wendy's parking lot, exchange the kids. And I think they were so young that they were a little like, okay, what's going on? And they did it. I think it took a little while for it to set in for them. And then we changed, things started to thaw just a little bit. And we started meeting in Macon because there's the big shopping center and the restaurants and all that. And so we could kind of go to Barnes and Noble, look at the stuffed animals, say a few words. It was a little bit easier for the kids than just a cold exchange in a parking lot. And then the tears and the wailing and it was bad. I would wail all the way home when the kids were with him. I mean, wail, ugly cry. It was awful.
That's hard.
Yeah.
I think at some point in that, like I said, it probably took a year or so. I know I decided that, we messed up, but our kids' lives don't have to be messed up. And I think we co-parented as good as you can do to not be in the same town. And that was tough,
Yeah.
But, because at the beginning, like she said, it was, y'all, here they are, bye. And then we started, like you said, we'd go to Barnes & Noble, and we went out to eat some, because I know that they don't have two parents together, but they need to see two parents being parents for them. And I think that was probably the start of when we started thawing and seeing that we could, work together on that. It became not about us after that. And I will give us kudos for that because we stepped up and
Right.
tried to be parents.
Yeah. And a lot of parents continue to put the kids in the middle, use them for leverage, right? And
Right.
it looks like you guys didn't do that. You really looked out for the welfare of the kids and tried to make it as good for them as possible.
Well, I
think-
mean, I know I said some things I probably shouldn't have.
I do think we tried. I mean, it's hard in
It
daily
is hard.
things. There are still struggles. It's so silly. Looking back, we had a struggle over clothing. It was so silly. Like we tried to keep it, well, you'll have this clothing at this house because you need the dressier clothing, you need the school clothes. And then at Daddy's house on the weekend, you're out on the farm and it's play clothes. And so I don't want to send the nice clothes down there because then you come home in camo and then I have to go buy something and I don't have the money. And so it became a power struggle over clothes, which
Wow.
is really silly. But that is realistic. That's what divorce looks like. There are little power struggles. There are big ones.
That was our biggest one.
That was probably one of the bigger
That was our biggest
hurdles. Well, just because, at the time our oldest daughter was old enough to where she got in the middle of that too. She had opinions.
Oh, yeah.
And so that that exacerbated the situation. But they pay a price too because they can't do sports. Yeah, I'm sorry you can't do Pee Wee football because you'll be gone to Dad's next weekend. And that started really breaking my heart too as they got older. That was sad to see. I hated that for them.
We were fixing to get into that stage, and I'll be honest. As a dad, who didn't see the kids all the time, every other weekend, and in the summers, that's not a lot of time when you love your kids. Someone has to say, and it would have been me had we not got remarried. They've got to establish a life somewhere, and it would have more than likely been in Athens. And they started playing ball and all that too, right? Because I started coming up there.
Yeah, they could when they were really young. It was okay. You're not penalized if you miss and you're playing t-ball.
Right.
But as you get older, I saw with Davis one baseball season. There are the dads there. They're working out before the game. They're doing the person or the trainers, with them before the game, because that's what sports look like now.
It was fixing to get really tough.
He really paid a price compared to the other little boys there. You could see it. So, I did get to the point at one time, maybe halfway through, where I started thinking, is there any way that I could move back to Americas? Although when I left, I thought I would never go back. There's the most painful thing ever. I'll never go back. But I thought, should I try? The houses, maybe there's like a tiny little cute house that I could afford, and I'd have to work, and somehow the kids would have to go to school and not homeschool anymore. I did start thinking it. Because at least if we lived in one town, the kids wouldn't pay that price and they could have activities. And so it was a thought. It was fleeting through my mind.
Yeah. All right, so tell me about how that you're divorced. How did God start working on your heart and bring you guys to a place where you were considering, hey, we could get back together?
I think she started that because I think God was working with her first. Because I remember when the kids came down one weekend, we had gone up to we had leased a farm in Ellaville. That's where I lived when we were separated. My parents were living there. So anyway, they came down one weekend, and we were out doing something, and I can't remember if I had taken them back. I think I had taken them back, and it was maybe a day or so afterwards. And I was thinking about it, just the weight of all that, and I remember walking out into the woods. It was in the dark, and I just sat down beside a tree, and I cried so much that I basically cried out. I didn't have any more tears. And at that point, I just went numb. So I shut off emotionally, put all that in a box.
That was early on.
Yeah, early on.
Yeah.
And so if God was trying to tell me something, I wasn't listening. I was just making it. I went to work, I went home, that was about all I did. So I think she was listening and searching, but I was just trying to survive at that point.
Yeah. He started whispering the word restoration to me. Within weeks of me moving to Athens. And I was like, I'm sorry, I'm not hearing that. I'm sure this is a stage of grief. And I remember a couple of times sitting down and kind of Googling marriage restoration and just to see what came up. And there were a couple of ministries and a couple of things, and I skimmed over it, and I was like, ooh, delete, and just went on. And the more he whispered that one word, restoration, I went into a full Jonah run. I was like, I'm not listening to this. This is crazy. Can you even imagine me telling our friends and family, like, oh, well, I'm thinking about getting back together? No. No, that is insanity. And so it was after the new year. That was in the fall of 2013 when we had divorced. And then after the new year shortly, I can't, really remember the details, but he would not relent. And I remember in my room just crying and doing I cry, Uncle, okay, if that's what you want me to pray, I will pray it. I don't understand it. I'm quite frankly mad about it. I don't get you, but okay, I'll pray. And so I did, and that was a whole journey that he took me on, and he really used me praying for restoration for our family, because I think that was the vision to start with, is the family restoration. It wasn't me going, I miss my husband and let's have the best marriage. It wasn't that. It was kind of diving into seeing what is his heart for family? What is his heart for marriage, and what is being in covenant with someone mean? It was a whole thing, but he really used that to start healing my heart. I wasn't necessarily seeking healing my heart, but that journey is how he did it for me. And he let me cry and fuss about Clark and how bad he was to me and how mad I was. He let me get all that out. And then it was like he was in the room with me. He was more real than he's ever been. It was like I felt his arm around me. He was like, okay, now we've talked about Clark. Let's talk about you. And he was so kind. See, he did. You have to trust him. And he was so kind, and he was so gentle that I could. Whereas the hurt person months ago that was like, you must respect your husband from the outside, I couldn't do that. But God was so kind, and he was so gentle, and he was healing me, and he was like, okay, now let's talk about you. And he was like holding me. And so I was able to go, okay, let's look at me, let's look at my part. And he started cleaning that nasty wound out. And funny story, I remember him, it was pretty early on after he started dealing with me, say, I guess it was Lent, so it would have been springtime. And I was all, like, oh, okay, I'll do a sugar fast. I'll do Lent. I had some Presbyterian friends at the time that were doing Lent, so that's why it was on my mind. And I was just being kind of casual about it, but he goes, no, I don't want you to fast sugar. And I was like, okay, what do you want me to fast? He goes, I want you to fast negativity, negative words, negative thoughts, negative feelings. Can't say anything about Clark, can't say anything about marriage. And I was like, okay. And I kid you not, the first 24 hours, it was, he held a mirror to my face, and I was like, this is a sickness. It was so deep ingrained, the resentfulness, the bitterness, the hurt, the negativity, and he allowed me to see it. It was like, I can't even explain it. I thought, I can't even go 24 hours without gushing about, it was mostly probably about the divorce, honestly, not the marriage, just how bad it was, how awful, and how could he do that to me? And but he really used that. He really used that to go, okay, I've got to heal. And so it was just a whole journey. And then it got more and more, I started forgiving him, started forgiving myself. And then it was like, let me teach you how to pray. Let me teach you how to go in the war room. And he was teaching me that before that movie came out. So when that movie came out, I was like, I have been there, girlfriend. I have been in the war room, declaring, decreeing, getting in the word, praying, fasting for this family. And so it was, Clark didn't know all that was going on behind the scenes. But it was major. There was major warfare going on for our family. I finally was like, God, this is your heart for families. Like, you are a redeemer, and it's not just of our soul. It's you. It's just who you are through and through. And it's so many layers of you came to redeem, and you are a restorer, and you love families, and you love a good ending and a restoration story. And he was just showing me that in layers all the time. And Clark would do something ugly, we'd meet, or he would call me a lot. Things were warming up a little bit, and I could tell there was definitely something there. Non-committal and a little chilly, but something. And he would say something rude or brusque, or just, sometimes men say things and they don't even realize it. And we're like, and the Lord would tell me over and over, like the vision of Peter. If you imagine that story, and Peter's walking out on the water to Jesus, and when he takes his eyes off Jesus, he sinks, and it's despair. And the Lord would say, you got to keep your eyes on me. Don't listen to what he says. He said one time, I'll never remarry. And I was like, I've been praying and fasting. And the Lord's like, don't listen to what he says. Keep your eyes on me. Look at me. Don't look at man. Don't look at Clark. Don't listen to what he says. So it's just things like that. He was growing me, and he was growing the trust I had in the Lord. And golly, did such a work in my life, in my relationship with him, like that whole experiencing God like I had never experienced him. It wasn't just in my head. He walked with me. He cried when my face was in the carpet. He provided financially for me left and right as a single mom. And I mean, Clark paid his child support. Don't hear me saying he was on time. He did what he was supposed to do, but still, it's tight paying, 4 kids. And I was homeschooling because my gracious parents let me live at their house. So I was able to homeschool. But God he just did so much and held us and carried us. And so it built a trust in me, and it built a relationship with him that I was able to then trust his plan. It went from being like, this is the craziest plan, I don't know what you're thinking, to, oh, you're so good and you can do this. And I now had the vision, like I can see how we'll be able to forgive each other and get past it, and families forgive each other, and what this will do for our kids to walk through a miracle. And he did a huge work. So in that 6 years.
Yeah, that's awesome. So Clark, how did this start impacting you? We just heard the story of how she went through this transformation. God really kind of took you into a private counseling session, right?
Did.
And just dealt with all the stuff,
the best counselor.
Yeah. And then, so what's happening in you?
Well, I don't remember. I mean, like I said, I put all that in a box, and I never looked at any of that stuff until after we were married again.
Okay.
I had, and Lauren knows this. I had dated someone a few times, but the whole time I remember, and it was kind of a friend thing. We went out a few times, and I remember the whole time thinking, this is not what I want. I don't want this. I'd love to have my family back together, but like I said, she was doing all this stuff incognito. I didn't really know a whole lot about it, but I always had that in the back of my mind. I'd love to have my family back together, but I was like, it was too damaged. I don't want to deal with what's going to have to happen to get it back together. Like I said, I had started a business. I poured everything into that. So I don't remember. And Lauren unless she just came out and told me, I'm praying for our family and stuff like that. But I was just like, no, that can't be.
Yeah.
What started it was the kids came down and we were praying at night before they went to bed, and I remember Davis saying, let's pray for a big miracle. And I was like, oh boy, what are they talking about up there in Athens that I don't know about, So I took the approach of, let's pray that God's will be done. Which I don't know if that's right or if that's wrong. You know what I'm saying?
It's a good way to pray.
Yeah, but the faith of a child. I didn't say you don't need to be praying that. So then I was like putting two and two together, and I was like, they're up there praying that this thing's gonna come back together. But I still I wanted my family put back together, but it just seemed so foreign. Like it couldn't happen. Although we were building some sort of a relationship through co-parenting our kids.
We were kind of dating, but not dating.
Yeah.
He was calling me at night.
Yeah,
He'd come home from a long day at work and call, and we'd go out to eat and make, and then all as a family. It was getting a little more warm.
And I think some of Lauren's friends were like, this is the craziest divorce I've ever heard of,
Yeah.
So I guess we kind of started dating, but not dating. I don't really know what you call it.
Yeah.
It's all weird once you get divorced anyway, really, in my opinion. But I think gradually I started warming, to the fact of, hey, my family might actually get put back together. I don't know.
Yeah.
And
So when you would come to church with the kids at Cornerstone, we've got those Connect cards. You can put prayer requests down.
Oh, yeah.
I don't know how many times we got the prayer request that my mom and dad would get back together.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, they came in and it seemed like floods,
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Here's another one.
Yep.
Those kids prayed. I know. I had people praying for us. I had ministries. I'd write to this ministry and be like, please pray for our marriage. I mean, I had people praying and on the warpath, and the kids were they were so sweet. I didn't do it in a way. I waited until I was in a healthier place, and I mean, that was really, they kind of initiated that. I don't remember that I said, you guys, let's pray. I don't think that sounds very healthy. It was done in a very healthy way, but that was their heart. They wanted to pray for their family. And Davis, we just laugh. We have gotten so much joy. That was Davis and his boisterous personality. We were gathering to pray one night before bed. And I don't know where he heard it. It sounded like a televangelist. He said, he was praying and asking God, he said, Lord, we pray for a miracle. And he stopped us and he goes, everybody say big miracle. And we were all kind of like, and we looked, and he wasn't going to keep going until we all said, we were like, big miracle. And then it was every night, everybody say big miracle. And we'd say big miracle. And it was just the sweetest, cutest thing. But that came out of his heart, and they were part of praying for their family and what God did. They really were.
Neat. So as things were warming up, you guys are starting to hang out a little bit more. You're talking on the phone. There probably had to be some pretty intense conversations, kind of dealing with some of the baggage from the past and just being real with each other.
I don't think so.
Really?
No. I was working on, that was my second lesson. Keep your eyes on me was first. Second was zip your lips. Zip your lips. Because he was not, and I knew he wasn't healing. He wasn't working on that. Everything was work. And so we weren't talking about our relationship. We weren't talking about the problems. We were, You tried, but I remember saying, I
don't
remember.
I remember saying, our first marriage and all was so heavy. Let's just not be heavy this time. Let's get together and let's have a good time. Let's don't be heavy. So I was like, I don't want to talk about that.
Yeah, he didn't want to talk about it.
And I don't think we talked about that until not very long before we got remarried. Yeah. And I remember thinking, when we talked about the court, I remember thinking, well, we might not make it.
This is going to blow like dynamite.
Yeah, because it got pretty bad. Because I think that hurt her. Like she said, it hurt her pretty deeply. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So we didn't really talk about any of that.
Well, did you not? You went into some counseling sessions where you guys kind of touched into some things from the past. Did you not?
That was once we got serious about. Okay. Yeah. Clark finally got to the point, which to my joy, and the text messages to the friends, it's like, he's talking about remarriage. All those prayers, and you know how girls do. But, once he finally was there and ready to go, I think we might. And he initiated. I mean, I knew that was not something I could push, not something I wanted to push. I wanted him to be there and be ready. So he did initiate it and say, I guess we need to talk about what that would look like. Okay. And, so we did. And I will tell you one thing we did that we did not do when we were married the first time. That I had learned to do just because of God's work in me is I was like, before we talk, why don't we invite Jesus into this room and into this conversation with us right now? So that way I can be protected, you can be protected, and just let's let him be in here. And Clark was like, all right, that's a good idea. And we did it, and we prayed together. We had prayed together some, but not like that before a big conversation. And I think it went so differently. I think that really ministered to him. And he said, like, wow, you're really different to talk to this time. And I was like, yeah, you were too. And that went pretty well. And I think it was after a few of those and feeling more confident that, we're talking about getting remarried. Then we contacted a counselor and went.
This is a story, but we had a disagreement last week. And I hadn't said this to you, but I remember thinking, man, she got over that quick. But I didn't I didn't do my normal like I would do in the past. You know, I didn't call anybody a name. I didn't go nuts, raise my voice, hollering, cussing. I was like, man, I like this way better.
Yeah, no doubt.
And that's ridiculous that it took me 20 years to get to that point. But, you know, it is different, and it's better. Lots better.
Yeah, so total different from first marriage to second marriage.
Yeah.
Total
Yeah,
difference.
big difference. And there's still big personalities. I mean,
Oh, yeah.
and we do, we still get into it or bicker or definitely see things differently. He's a feeler and feels all the things, and I'm a logic and let's run the numbers and here's the planned out. And he cannot understand how that works, and I cannot understand how his brain works.
Yeah.
But now we're just like, well, I'm going to love you anyway. And we'll just like, we'll get through it.
We're two passionate people, too. I mean, and with I don't mean that in a physical way. You know, just
Right.
with passion is fire, and fire burns. You know what I mean? So I feel that passion, and she thinks about that passion, and sometimes it just explodes.
Right.
But it's different than it was. It used to really, it was like lava then.
Yeah.
Now it's kind of warm yourself around it. You know what I mean? Different kind of fire.
Right.
And she's my best friend. Then I wouldn't have said that. Thought she was my best enemy. And she probably thought the same of me. But
Yeah.
it's not like that now.
Do you guys have any keys? Like, you're like, okay, we've been through the first marriage, real struggle, now into this second marriage. Do you have any like takeaways or keys? Like, hey, these are some of the foundations of a strong marriage, of a healthy marriage. Do you have any takeaways that you'd be like, hey, these are top 3 things that I think,
I think everybody needs to work on their communication. I mean, we were horrible at it, obviously. I don't think, we didn't know we were horrible at it. Everybody brings their baggage in and all that. You don't know till you live with somebody what's gonna, that iron, rubbing. But that would be, I would definitely say, if you're gonna have a good marriage and a good friendship and a good relationship with somebody you're gonna live with, you really need to hone your communication skills.
It's good. Yeah.
And I think that's, I saw this the other day on Instagram, it's like 5 things, you need to talk about: family, finances, sex, all that. And I think people, you hear that in marriage counseling, but you really need to know and say, look, this is what I expect, and hear the other person say, this is what I expect, and try to nail that down before and not during.
And I don't think we got in the nitty gritty of that in our premarital.
No, we didn't.
We were given a personality test, and just kind of went over the briefs. You're this and you're that. And then I think the rest of it was, we just, read this book. We want to make sure you're saved. Oh, you guys are saved. Yes, I'll perform the ceremony. And that was it.
Everything should be great, right?
Yeah, it's going to be great.
I think it's very important to have a clear vision of where you're going, because at early on, it's just love, but man, that wears off after a while when reality starts hitting. And I think it's very important to sit down and have a direction, and both want to go in that direction, because I think we pulled against each other in a lot of areas. And a marriage just won't make it through that, because when Lauren said communication, if you're pulling against one another, you're not going to communicate.
Right.
And while you're not communicating, and I'm looking over there saying, well, she's pulling this way, and you're building resentment. And the more that gets built up, the less you can communicate, and it just,
Yeah.
it should be a lot more forethought and a lot more people letting mentors come alongside before you say I do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The partnership it's super important, and I had no concept of that.
And I didn't
It was
either.
all the love and the romance and the true love waits, and we weren't moving in together and living together for 5 years and like, man, I can't live with that dude. It was all rainbows, and and unicorns. So,
And I really thought, because we were Christians and we grew up in Christian homes, that it would be okay.
yeah, I did too.
And that's a lie.
There
I
was
mean,
no, like
it
you
should have
said,
been,
the
but-
vision.
Yeah.
I don't think we talked about that. I think we did talk about like, oh, we're going to do great things for the kingdom. And yeah, we shared that vision. We want to go with God.
What does
And that
mean?
was about it.
Yeah.
That as far as where we're headed and how we're going to get there and yeah.
Yeah, that's good. You know, I talk about 3 phases in marriage. It's the happy honeymoon, right? And you kind of see each other through these rose-colored glasses.
Right.
Everything's great. And then you have the party's over phase, you know,
Right.
where you start like, well, this person does have some flaws. There are some differences, there's some
Right.
difficulties here. And then hopefully you move out of that into mature love where, you know,
Right.
you work on it and you walk out that love of Jesus in a sense and
Right.
make it work. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But a lot of times people get stuck in that party's over
Right.
phase and never get out of there into that mature love, phase. So, yeah. That's good.
true.
Well, hey, I appreciate you guys coming in here and having this conversation with us and
Yes, sir.
really laying out your life in front of all of us to learn from and to see also God's testimony of how he's brought you through this. We're so excited just to be able to rejoice with you guys and how God has just healed the two of you and brought you together and just really strengthened your family through this. So as we're getting ready to wrap up, let me ask you one more question. What advice would you give to somebody who's maybe watching this right now that is going through maybe very similar problems that you had in your first marriage? Maybe feeling like there's no way out, that they're chained, they're at a dead end, they need out. You know what I mean? What advice would you give to them knowing what you know now? What would you say to help them?
I have 3 things and we kind of talked about this ahead of time. So they're pretty much on the same page. One of the first ones I said was, you got to get out of the shadows, feeling isolated. And if you feel like you have to put on the mask, the Christianity mask, and everything's okay, and I can't tell people how crazy it is, and that can go for that covers a multitude of things. If it's addiction, if it's whatever, you just got crazy in your family, crazy patterns, relationships. But I would say bring it into the light, because the enemy loves to work in the darkness. When you feel isolated, you feel alone, you feel like I'm the only one, our marriage is the worst. And that goes into number 2, which is we both said get professional help. And no offense, but we just, not just our experience, but I've talked to so many people that were like, don't just go to pastoral counseling. Most pastors aren't trained for the dirty, the down and the dirty when you're in rough. Some are, but many are not. And I think it's just, you got to go to somebody who really, especially in our case, there was abuse, and just people need to recognize that, and they're trained. How do you deal with somebody who has an abusive mindset? And pastors don't. They're like, hey, that's that nice guy at church, and so that was.
Yeah, to some, I agree with that, because in some sense, the pastors are general practitioners.
Yeah,
we deal with a
exactly.
lot of different
Yeah.
issues,
Right.
and so
Yeah.
we're kind of that general practitioner. When you have a specialty issue
Yeah.
or a
Right.
deep issue, sometimes you got to go on to somebody who specializes
Right.
in that field,
Yes.
that deals with that every day, day in and day out, right?
Yes.
And the general practitioner will do that. They'll
Yes.
send you on,
That's
hey,
right.
you need to go see a specialist.
Yeah.
There's times that we need to do that. We're going to understand our position as pastors, say, hey, this is kind of beyond my training, my ability, my expertise. I don't deal with this all the time, and I need to
Right.
move this person on to somebody else that can help them.
Right.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And the third thing I came up with, and I learned it afterward, I wish I had known, was get help for yourself. I think I wanted us to go to marriage counseling together, and let's do it together. And of course, I was like, he's the problem, not me. You just have all these things you think. But I should have gotten help for myself. And I did have a counselor tell me shortly after the divorce, he was like, if you don't put the oxygen mask on yourself, you can't help. You can't be a good mom to your kids. You can't. And that nobody had ever told me that. And of course, now I've heard it a million times, but you have to get help for yourself, whether your partner goes, whether they want to, it doesn't matter. Like, you can't, like I mentioned, I could have gone into addiction. I could have become suicidal. You just get darker and darker if you don't get help for yourself. So get healed, because you can't have a healed marriage unless you're. And God healed me, and then I could pray for our family, and that's what I felt like my role was. Like, He's healing me, and now Clark's not healing. He's not interested in that right now, but I can pray for him. I can hold him up and pray for this family, and that's how He did it in our story. But that's just what I would tell anybody, and I have told many people, get help for yourself and separate. If you need to get out, if you're not safe, if you can't even have a conversation, get out, like, separate. It's okay. God cares about the individual, and get some healing before you try to bring it back together. And
That's good.
Yeah.
That's good. All right. Anything else you guys want to share before we wrap it up?
To kind of mirror what she says, I believe in getting professional help, and you may have to shop around to find the right one. I think one thing that does damage to marriages in the situations you're talking about is the husband talks to these people, and the wife talks to these people, and it's not unified.
Yeah.
But if you want to unify something, there's common ground somewhere. But you can't go out and be getting fishing and getting everybody's opinion.
Yeah.
Because a lot of times, and I'll say in my case, you get somebody on your side, and then, well,
And you tell them just what you really want them to know, right?
Yeah, well, I know she's the problem, or I know he's the problem.
Yeah.
And that just,
Yep.
but like she said, pull the cover off of it. Say we have problems. We don't do that as Americans and as Christian Americans, and which is just to our detriment in a lot of areas, in my opinion. But find some common ground and go together.
Yeah.
Get some professional help, because, like I said earlier, I'm not a fan of divorce, especially with kids involved. And looking back, I should have done a lot more, because this is not the norm. Everybody doesn't have this, and I don't mean that in a arrogant way, because I mean it brought me low to be sitting here to do this. You know what I mean? But it's worth trying.
And I did read in some of my learning, like during the divorce and after, that there are counselors that will work with your pastor. So therefore, it's like, whether Clark's seeing somebody and I'm seeing somebody, but the pastor's the common ground, so that there can be accountability.
Yeah.
Or if we're seeing the same person separately, because in my case, because there was abuse, I didn't feel safe talking in front of him. I didn't want to talk in front of him, because as soon as we left the office, there was going to be pushback, and I would just not want to really say the truth. So I needed to get somebody separate. He probably would have done better with somebody separate, but then it would have been great if we had a common that we could have all been in the loop of therapy together.
That's right.
Keeping this thing going. So.
No, I love that. And that's the approach that I typically take, is I like a multi-pronged approach.
Yeah.
So they continue, like, meet with me maybe once a month. We just sit down and talk and kind of assess where they're at. I send them off to, like, the specialist, right?
Yeah.
The counselor, to help them with the marriage. I like to get them connected with a man or woman in the church where they can kind of have an accountability partner, somebody that's there for them, pray for them, be a sounding board a little bit. You know what I mean? And so you get this multi-pronged approach. That's the power of community.
Yes.
And helping somebody, make it through a tough circumstance and
That's
situation.
right.
So I think that's one of the keys to healing.
Yeah.
So yeah,
Absolutely.
that's good. Awesome. Well, thanks for coming in and sharing your heart, sharing what God has brought you through and brought you to. And like I said, we're so happy that God has brought your marriage back together, restored it, and healed it. And you guys have a great family, and appreciate being able to kind of walk through this with you in this conversation.
Yeah. Can I plug a ministry?
Yeah, go ahead.
If there's anybody listening that feels led to pray for restoration, whether you're separated or divorced, and I know that has to be God putting that on your heart. Rejoice Marriage Ministries was what I found when I was kind of exploring that idea, and they were a couple that were restored after affairs and drug addiction and things, but they went on to have a long ministry. One of them has died now. They're elderly now, but their ministry is amazing. She is so steeped in the Word and just encourages you with the Word and steps on your toes like a loving grandma in the best of ways. But they were a wonderful encouragement to me. So,
Wow, awesome. Great. Well, thanks for joining us for this episode of Family Talk. We'll see you next time. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of Family Talk. You can stay up to date on our family conversations by subscribing. Follow us on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, or on TikTok. All those links can be found in the show notes. You can also hit the share button and share this episode on social or with someone that you love. And finally, dropping a rating and telling us what you think of this episode will help spread our conversations. Thank you for being a part of our family here at Family Talk. We'll see you next time.